Once again, I am taking a look at a phone with two screens that only cost me $200. With that, let's jump in and find out what this one's all about. What I have here is the original Surface Duo. This was Microsoft's answer to the foldable smartphone market that was released in September of 2020. Now, this isn't my first run-in with the Surface Duo. I was actually at the launch event in New York City prior to the pandemic, and there they talked up a pretty big game about how they collaborated with Google in order to optimize the dual-screen Android experience. This was also right around the time where other smartphone brands were experimenting with alternative form factors. Samsung had tried and failed with the first-gen Galaxy Fold, and even LG was experimenting with the Wing, as well as dual-screen accessories for phones like the V60 and LG Velvet. We actually took a look at some of these phones on the channel last year, so definitely go check that out if you're feeling particularly nostalgic. But, woo, okay, our Surface Duo looking pretty clean. So again, we bought this for $200 on eBay. It's actually an offer that I made to the seller, which they happily accepted. And this is looking like it's in solid condition. Granted, there are some fingerprints on the screen, but no scratches to be found. Actually, there are maybe 2 or so longer scratches here and maybe some scuffing on the sides, but nothing too egregious in the scheme of wear and tear over the past couple of years. And the screen looks totally fine. Yo, I forgot how thin this device was, and the hinge feels so good. This is certainly the epitome of premium I think you can get for 200 bucks. This is a solid device. And the fact that this came with the box as well, again, for 200 bucks, dang. All right. Now, while I don't think this would make a great primary smartphone for reasons that we'll get to a little later on in the video, I think this could actually make for a great secondary phone, or even just owning it for the sake of novelty could be cool. Because I have a feeling with this unique design that it'll be very fun to have around. Let's turn it on, if it'll power on. Oh, it needs a charge. All right, and there we go. Powered by Android and not Windows. Oh yeah, man. The pixel density on these displays are so good. That is crispy. Yeah. All right, let me go set up this phone, use it for a couple of days, and I'll report back with some of my thoughts.
3 days later.
All right, Surface Duo. When this phone launched in 2020, it retailed for an eye-watering $1,400, which at that price set expectations quite high amongst reviewers. But ultimately, the experience ended up being half-baked, buggy, and it didn't help that it was running a flagship Snapdragon processor from a generation prior. It was far from being a good value in 2020, but now in 2024, and with $1,200 in depreciation, as well as some software updates, I think the Surface Duo has a new lease on life. It ended up being way better than I was expecting it to be. First of all, as someone that's used plenty of Android foldables in the past, there's something that feels organic about multitasking between two individual displays. Each of them are 5.6 inches diagonally, with a 1350 by 1800 resolution and an aspect ratio of 4:3. That gives us plenty of screen real estate to take advantage of, especially with Microsoft's own build of Android 12. You are able to launch apps independently on each screen, as well as span one singular app across the displays to make it a pseudo tablet with a 3:2 aspect ratio. And thankfully, the screens are offset toward the center of the device when fully opened up to visually minimize the gap. That said, it is quite satisfying when you find an app that actually optimizes for the dual displays. For example, using the Kindle app to read on the Duo like it's a book is pretty sick. And because of the dual screen arrangement on here, how could I not try some Nintendo DS emulation? For this, I'm using an app called Drastic, and it feels right at home on this device. Even the touch controls work perfectly. You'll still want to use a physical controller for the most optimal experience, though keep in mind that fitment with controller grips can be a bit tricky thanks to the Duo's odd shape and the placement of its USB-C port. I tried out the Razer Kishi, which was a no-go. I also gave the Backbone a shot, which was kind of doable, but really something like the GameSir X2S is absolutely perfect for an odd device like the Surface Duo. They actually kind of look like they were made for each other. Something that also surprised me was the performance. The 2019 Snapdragon 855 might not hold a candle to more modern flagship SoCs, but it's no slouch either, especially given that I had decent experiences with both the Gen 1 Moto Razr Foldable as well as the LG Wing, both of which had mid-range specs for around that time period. By comparison, the 855 offers plenty more performance. And again, I can't stress enough how much I love this design. It's certainly wider than the average Ultra and Pro Max smartphone, but carrying this around almost feels akin to having a Moleskine notebook, only if it were made out of glass and aluminum. Plus, the fit and finish is very characteristic of Surface, which is to say, very high quality. The hinge is perfectly tuned, it's smooth and will lock into any position you leave it at, and it goes all the way around completely flush. This allows you to use the Duo in single screen mode, much like a normal smartphone, again, just with a wider profile. And I must say that the tolerance is super satisfying here. You might not expect the closing of glass on glass to result in a soft close, but yeah, that sounds so good. However, this brings me to one of a few major drawbacks I found with the Surface Duo, even considering its $200 price point. Firstly, with this phone being majority glass on all four sides, durability is a major concern. There is a lot of slippery surface area on here to scratch or crack, and with an iFixit repairability score of 2, best rock it with the stock bumper, some kind of case, or a skin from Dbrand as a precaution. Something else that can be polarizing for people is that the screen bezels are quite large, especially on the top and bottom. I do think this deserves a little bit of a pass, given that it gives your fingers and hands more places to hold, which is nice considering how thin this device can get. But visually, even for a phone from 2020, it does hold the design back quite a bit. Now, while Microsoft worked with Google to optimize Android for the Surface Duo, even after they had updated the firmware to address reliability issues early on, bugs and oversights with the UX can be quite annoying to deal with from time to time. There are little quirks here and there, like the phone getting very confused on how to auto-rotate. Sometimes apps like to open up in landscape, other times they'll open up in portrait. One moment it might listen to the accelerometer and rotate the screen on demand, and then later on it just flat out will not work. There's no consistency here, which is very annoying. Also, while it is cool that you're able to span apps across both displays to make this one gigantic tablet, something I find odd is that there's actually a dead zone of pixels square in the middle where the bezel and hinge are, as if there was a piece of screen here. This can be especially annoying when you have to get to a UI element, such as a button or a piece of text, and it's aligned perfectly in the center right where that dead zone is. Fishing it out is never all that hard. Usually I have to force an app into single screen mode, do what I have to do, then expand it out again in order to make it work. But if you have to do it often, like I had to do when I was setting up this phone, it didn't quite leave me with the best first impression. Looking beyond the quirks in UX due to this phone's dual screens, it is a shame to see that the Surface Duo is not getting any more Android software updates. performance. Plus, I think the stock launcher on the Surface Duo looks kinda bad from a visual perspective. There's a lot of wasted space, especially with the home screen dock. And on top of all of that, this phone came with so much bloatware installed. To be fair, this might be par for the course considering it's a $200 smartphone, but imagine someone paying that $1,400 premium back in the day only to find ads for DirecTV and the NBA. Not cool. Additionally, there is a camera on here, though it's only really good for video calls. If you're expecting flagship camera quality from a 2020 phone, you're not gonna get it here with the Surface Duo. And lastly, there is the battery, which is rather small. Considering how crazy thin the Surface Duo is, credit where credit's due, the fact that Microsoft fit a 3,500 milliamp hour battery in here is impressive. However, considering the fact that this got updated to Android 12 and also probably experienced some battery degradation with age, I find it difficult to get more than a couple of hours out of this thing when watching videos, browsing socials, and light emulation gameplay. For better or for worse, this phone also doesn't have 5G, but if it did, holy shit, this would probably last all of like 10 minutes. But undeniably, this is among the most unique devices that you can buy at this price point, and it is still surprisingly capable for an Android phone in 2024. But let me know if you would buy one in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching this video on Denki Channel.